Kaylee Gonzalez, and this is my presentation on civil rights and civil liberties. Starting with the First Amendment, you can find freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and freedom of the press. Beginning with freedom of religion, this allows you to practice your religion without government interference, and the U.S. government cannot establish a national religion or a state church. So the first misconception is people believe it doesn't apply to non-religious individuals, which isn't true. It's supposed to not only protect people to openly practice their religion, but also to protect those who are not in a religion, so they can't be forced into one. The second misconception is that it grants the right to break criminal laws in the name of religion. Again, no, it doesn't permit anyone to break any federal or state laws, so if your religion requires a human sacrifice, then that's when the government can step in and put a stop to it. Up next is freedom of speech, and this allows for public criticism of the government. Something that Americans may not know is that hate speech is actually protected under the First Amendment. So as long as the speech doesn't cross any lines like getting violent or becoming a threat, it is constitutionally protected. The second, one misconception is that freedom of speech protects you from everything. Not true. This only applies to government agencies. So private entities like social media platforms have their own rules that you have to abide to. Last thing on the First Amendment is freedom of the press. And the media has the right to gather and report information and opinions to the public without government censorship or interference. The first misconception is many believe it provides an unlimited right to publish anything without consequence. That's not true. Freedom of the press isn't absolute, and it does have limitations, so somebody can sue the press if they publish something that they don't like or they seem it's incorrect. The second misconception is the freedom also applies to private companies. So similarly to freedom of speech, that's not true. This only applies to government agencies. So again, social media platforms, for example, can restrict, remove content, or ban users without violating the First Amendment. Up next, we have the Fourth and Fifth Amendment. And the Fourth Amendment is search and seizure. And this protects you from unreasonable searches and seizures. So the first misconception is if the police have a warrant, they can search wherever they want. That's not true. A warrant has to specify the location that's going to be searched in, and officers can only search within that location. Something that people may not know is many believe they have to agree to a police search if they want to search their property. No, you do have the right to say no and refuse if the police does not have a warrant, and the police has to accept that answer. Up next, we have due process of law, and which you can find under the Fifth Amendment, and this protects everyone to have a fair trial. The first misconception is that it only applies to citizens. That's not true. Due process is meant to protect all individuals within the United States, including non-citizens and undocumented people. The second misconception is that it guarantees a lawyer for everyone. In criminal cases, yes, defendants are entitled to a government-funded lawyer if they can't afford one, but in civil and immigration cases, the government isn't required to provide a lawyer. Up next is the Ninth Amendment, and this protects rights that are not explicitly listed in the Constitution. Something people may not know is that the framers wanted to ensure that those interpreting the Constitution would recognize that the lists of freedoms and rights in the Bill of Rights was not thorough. Another thing people may not know is that a significant portion of the Ninth Amendment is still a matter of debate to this day. Moving on to the 10th Amendment, this limits the power of the federal government by giving that power to the states or to the people. The first misconception is that the 10th Amendment protects cities and counties from state overreach. This only applies actually to the relationship between federal government and the states, not to state and local governments. The second misconception is that the 10th Amendment grants states powers that were not given to the federal government. In reality, this only reserves powers the Constitution doesn't give to the United States, aka the federal government, to the states or to the people. Moving on, we have the 14th Amendment, which is also called the Equal Protection Clause. And the Equal Protection Clause requires that governments treat all individuals equally under the law. The first misconception is that the goal of equal protection is to achieve equal results or outcomes for all citizens. The clause only protects against the misuse of government power and ensures that there is a fair process, but it's not meant to achieve a successful or desirable outcome. The second misconception is that it protects against discrimination by private businesses or organizations. It actually only limits the actions of federal, state, and local governments. Private discrimination has to be addressed by separate federal or state laws. Lastly, discrimination, which is also found in the 14th Amendment, states that as long as you are born in the United States or are naturalized, you are a citizen and are entitled to the same treatment as other citizens, and no one is supposed to discriminate against you. The first misconception is that discrimination does not need to be intentional to be illegal. While, yes, outright discrimination is illegal, anti-discrimination laws also cover policies or actions that have a negative effect on a protected group. So even if it was unintentional. The second misconception is that at-will employment, aka employers who can fire people without warning, does not protect against discrimination firing. This is not true. In reality, at-will states can't fire someone based on their race or gender. This would fall under discrimination and would also be considered wrongful termination. So this was my presentation, and thank you so much for listening.